Welcome to the NWI.com Political Roundtable for Thursday, July 17th. I'm Robert Blaszkiewicz, Assistant Managing Editor of The Times. Joined with me today, Assistant Managing Editor Crista Zivanovic. It's been a couple weeks since we've had a roundtable here, so it's a lot we want to get to. Start off locally with something that's just broken just this afternoon, which is actions by the South Shore Convention and Visitors Association regarding the John Dillinger Museum.
To the best of my knowledge, the bottom line basics, you can read more about it online later today and in tomorrow's print editions. It is moving back to the Crown Point old courthouse, which is where it was initially, and then there was some legal action, and I think the great-nephew of John Dillinger's, Jeff Scalf, had sued the Convention Visitors Bureau, and they lost. They had to give him some money. They moved the museum to the Visitors Bureau, which was a good location, and I guess it had, people visiting it, but it would really be nice to put it back to where the original jail was in Lake County.
Where
that
Dillinger
has more,
was.
Exactly, where Dillinger was held.
History.
Exactly, and I'm not sure if there it was where he used the wooden gun and all the lore. So read all the details more about that later.
Right. Also in Lake County, there was some talk that we had in today's edition about some of the expenses. There's long been some scrutiny of expenses by the Lake County Solid Waste Board administrators, and recently there's been some more questions.
Well, I guess Executive Director Jeff Langben was warned about a year ago by some of the board members for irregularities in spending, using taxpayer dollars to spend money on things they didn't, meals and other things that they did not think were warranted. And apparently then things settled down, and now again board members are raising questions. We had a story today. We'll be covering the meeting tonight to see if the board approves the expenses. One of the rather more kind of crazy ones was a staffer completed a master's degree, and Executive Director Langben bought her a briefcase from Macy's for $750 or more of taxpayer money, and some of the board members complained and said that's something, if you want to do, you take up an office donation,
office collection. That's how most people.
Yes, exactly. And then there were some meals with Purdue University Calumet officials to discuss the recycling. The solid waste district is under the gun to increase recycling by 10%. So those are the things you would think that the executive director, who's paid in the six figures, would be focusing on. Other things that were spent, I guess, nearly $1,000 on candy to be thrown out at parades and to give to children for other events. So some people might justify some of those expenses.
Promotional, education, kind of those things.
So I leave it up to readers to read the story today and tomorrow and see what you think. But again, he's under the gun for,
Yeah. Well, something we weren't able to get to last week because we weren't on last week, but I wanted to bring it up, is catching up on some of the very interesting political intrigue going on with the Department of Education in Indiana, and particularly following up on Tony Bennett, the former state superintendent, his ethics issues, and the ethics, the State Ethics Commission finally last week ruled on what Tony Bennett was doing, which is very similar in fact to what George Van Til is in legal trouble right now for, and that was using public property for campaign purposes.
Right.
And basically what the State Ethics Commission ruled, that they fined him $5,000. But in making that ruling, they said his mistake was actually that he had signed a pledge not to do that and violated that pledge. But he could have, if he wanted to, he could have given himself permission ahead of time to use this state property for campaign purposes, and it would have been fine. And so basically what they did in this ruling was give the 7 statewide elected office holders, which includes the governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state.
Is it the top 5?
It's 7, I believe.
7, okay.
So attorney general, they have basically they can basically write policy themselves to allow themselves to use state property for campaign purposes. We editorialized against this on Sunday and saw a lot of reaction that was fairly negative, justifiably so, toward that ruling.
Well, and here's part of where I see the problem. I know Dan Cardin spoke with some people, Republicans and Democrats in Indianapolis, our State House Bureau Chief. And a lot of people said, it's very hard when you're in office to separate your time and haul out your own personal laptop and set it up and have them both running and to have separate calendars. I think citizens understand that, respect that, appreciate that. On the other hand, where do you draw the line and where do you stop?
Right.
And that's where I think it's particularly heinous that these office holders elected by the people to do the state's business and bidding should now be allowed to exempt themselves and at will use public computers and staff to further their own remaining in office. So I think there has to be some better resolution than that. I think common sense understands there might be some overlap, but this just seemed to me kind of an egregious overreach.
And compliments to Dan Cardin, our State House reporter, for really ferreting out that angle, because that could have flown below the radar. The story was supposed to be that $5,000 fine against Tony Bennett, but I think that was
Dan is a great one for reading between the lines, reading more, reading extra, going the extra mile.
Yeah. So and then in other Department of Education news, we saw the State Board of Education continue its what it's been doing in trying to just wrest power away from the state superintendent Glenda Ritz, who defeated Tony Bennett in that election, and shift more power to the governor's new committee on education, CECI. I forget what exactly it stands for.
I can't remember either. CC.
But that, of course, has stirred a lot of outcry from supporters of Ritz, who say that it's basically an anti-democratic power grab because Ritz was elected by the people, and now her will is being subverted by the state board, which is appointed by the governor. So all these the board members have either been appointed by Mitch Daniels or Mike Pence, although there are Democrats and Republicans both on it. It's kind of stirred up a lot. We are going to have an op-ed running in Sunday's edition, Sunday's Forum section. Watch for that, by Gordon Hendry, who's a board member from Indianapolis,
and a Democrat,
who is quite critical in the op-ed of the leadership of Superintendent Ritz. So where do you see this going?
I have no idea. The first thing that I think upset me was after Glenda Ritz won and beat Tony Bennett in an upset, that is when the governor put together this CC board. We have a superintendent, we have a state board of education.
At great expense.
And you would think precisely. I think that one of the people on the CC board makes more money than the governor. So here's a governor who is pledging to cut costs, cut taxes, possibly for a presidential bid, possibly not, just for the fiscal health of the state, willing to spend millions of dollars to create a new agency that
for someone who preaches less government, this is more government.
Right. So. And so there's that piece to it, that angle. And the other is that in prior years we have had a Democratic governor and a Republican state school superintendent, and they seem to work very well together and get along. So I think that this continuing wedge-driving issue that the current administration seems to be pursuing, he has succeeded. He put CC in place, and
amid all this, you have getting rid of Common Core, which is this controversial issue.
And that's another crazily divisive thing. Governor Daniels and Tony Bennett, both Republicans, were all for it. They put it in place. They supported it. And now you have strange bedfellows, both Glenda Ritz, the new Democratic superintendent, and Republican Governor Pence, decrying it and saying it's too nationalized and we need to have our own Indiana standards.
So it is interesting because you have opposite ends of the political spectrum for different reasons opposing Common Core. So it is very interesting.
What seems to me to be getting lost in the whole thing is test scores are still declining. Schools are still doing poorly. Indiana ranks pretty darn low in the low 40s among the country, and the country itself, among first world and some second and third world nations, we rank very low in scholastic achievement and academic success. So
well, and that's the other element here is this school reform movement, which is actually very much supported by the Obama administration and the U.S. Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan. In fact, you might remember when Arne Duncan came and spoke up here at the Radisson to the one region?
One region.
Yeah, he spoke here. He was introduced by Tony Bennett. So they were very much on the same side of this school reform movement. Glenda Ritz is obviously pushing back against that movement, and that's what has stirred up this conflict. And it raises the debate: would it be better to have the Secretary of Education appointed by the governor, so that
you mean the superintendent?
The superintendent,
right? Well, that is what the Times editorial board is pushing and suggests.
Yeah. But for now, this seems like a ham-handed way to handle the situation. It's one thing to say, okay, yeah, you know what, we'd be better off if we had this at an appointed position, and the governor could basically, steer education policy
Treat
the way he
that
wants.
the way he does other state
Right.
agencies that he's in charge of. Exactly.
But for now, we're stuck with what we're stuck with. So, duplicative agencies and a superintendent who's been basically had her power taken away.
Yeah.
So, well, that's all the time we have this week. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week with another political roundtable.